Hello and welcome to this New Year special where we're going to be making 5 extensions in this one video. So the extensions we're going to be making is first is a word of the day extension that will be in our new tab. Then we're going to be making what I like to call epic mode to play music in the background whilst you're browsing on any tab, and you can select between 3 different music tracks which we'll grab from the YouTube music library. After that, we're going to be building a simple web scraper. So this will let us perform a number of actions on a page and either press buttons or grab content from the page. And I'm actually going to be making a more in-depth and advanced class on Skillshare on making a web scraper extension. So you can find a link to that below, but that's not launched just yet. And then finally, we're going to be building a to-do list pop-out extension that will let you add in your to-do items, mark them as complete, and then delete them. So they're the different extensions that we're going to be building, and I'm going to start with the code I made in the last video, which is a bunch of starter templates for making extensions. So if you want to use the code that I'm showing in this video, you can either download the starter or you can download the completed code, which you can find in the description. But otherwise, let's get started. In this first extension, we're building our word of the day. So I'll show you over here some notes that I've put together for this extension. Okay, so here we are. So it's a word of the day, simple enough. So it'll be in our new tab. And whenever we open a new tab, we want a really clean design, and it will show us our word of the day and then a dictionary description of what this word means. Now, luckily, there's an API that can do all of the heavy lifting for us. So all we need to do is call this API in our background page, find out what the word is, what the description is, and then display it nicely on the page. So here is the API that we're going to be using. So we'll sign up and make an account, and then we'll start working on the code. So what we're going to be doing here, because it's a new tab extension, we're just going to duplicate our new tab over here. So we'll duplicate and we're going to call this word of the day. And there is our folder that we're going to be working with for this extension. So we'll update our manifest, add a new description, and then here is our new tab.html. So we'll save that. We can delete this music here because we don't need that. And there is our new tab. So we're going to change this again to word of the day, and then delete everything else in here. So now we're ready to get started connecting up to our API. So if we go back to our notes here, we're going to be registering an API account with this site here. So if you want, I've added a link in the description to this service. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead now and set up my account. So before I create my account, I'll show you what this API documentation looks like. So as you can see, we have a number of different endpoints for this API, and we're going to be using this one down here, word of the day. So all you need to do is you just pass in the date. So for example, today, and then you click try it out, and it will give you your response. So there's your word, and that is what it means. Where is it? Yeah, that's what it means. So it gives you a definition and more information about that word. But all we need is the word and the description. So now we need to go ahead and create our API key. So I'll go ahead and get mine created now. Okay, so one small problem with this API is that it takes sometimes up to 24 hours to a week for you to actually get your API key. So what we're going to be doing is coding the backend with some set random words that we can use with descriptions, and then we're going to display these in our front end. So once we actually have our API, we can then update just this one part of the code of the extension, and everything else will still work exactly as we would expect. So don't worry about this if you have this same problem. So you just follow along and you'll be able to still build the extension. So what we need to do still is go back to the docs and find our word of the day. So down here. So we'll put everything we need for this call in our code anyway, but we'll just comment it out for now and replace it later. So what we need to do is go back to Atom and start preparing our page for these words. So we're going to keep it really, really simple. So we're going to add a section tag just here where all of the content will appear. And then inside this, we're going to just have an H1, which will be our word. And then underneath, there'll be a paragraph tag with a description of this word. So it looks something like this. And then obviously we want to add a bit of styling to make this stand out nice as well. So we'll add a style sheet up the top here. And set our body. Now, one thing that you could do is also add a random unsplash background image. So if we have time, I'm just trying to keep an eye on how long this is going to take. We can add that as well. But to begin with, we'll just put a nice smooth background color. So if we just load this into Chrome now, and let's see what we have so far. Okay, so here is our word of the day extension so far. Now, as you can see, we want to have this centered right in the middle of the page, with our word actually much bigger than this, and a description probably in a slightly different font as well. So we'll just tweak this slightly. So we'll go to our section block, display flex, line item center, and justify content center as well. Not quite what we're looking for. Okay, so there we have this part, but we want to make sure that we fill the whole page as well. So to do that, we'll do exactly the same thing with our body. We can see that, yeah, we need to adjust the height. Just tidy this up. Okay, and then we'll just take this away. Okay, so here is our word information centered into the middle of the page. Now let's just add a bit more styling here. So if we go to our section H1, we'll make this huge on the page. And then we can remove all of the padding and margin associated with this as well. And then we want to do a similar thing for our paragraph. So we'll change the font size about 1.5 and see how that looks. Okay, so now what we need to do, again, we're making this really simple. We're going to try and move through these as quickly as we can. So we need to make sure that this word can be dynamic, so it can change each time. So what we're going to add is a background page that we can make calls to. So this is where we'll be calling the API as well. So what we need to do is add a background page over here. Now, if you're following along using the same templates, what you can do is if you look at the manifest of our background message just here, you can basically copy and paste the code from that page or from that manifest into our extension just here. So now we need to add a background.html into our page. So if we just go new file, background.html, and then in here, we're going to add another new file. This is background.js. Now you can add a background script in directly, but I think this helps just to keep things a little bit more consistent. Like this. So all I then need to do, I'll just copy this across, is paste this in here and then call background.js. So what we have now is our manifest is the same as it was before, just with this new object added into our manifest that calls in a background page that's persistent false, which is important. And then in here, we just call in our background.js. And this is where we're going to be doing all of our interaction with the API and with our front end. So all we need to do now is make sure that we have our script.js open and our background.js open. So again, if you want to follow along a little bit easier, what you'll notice if you go to the background message example extension and just copy this event listener into your new background.js, and then from the content script, copy where we're sending the message and paste that into here. And then you can then close that content script and close that background message function. So what this has done, this code here lets us interact with each of these files. So our content script can talk to our background page and our background page can talk to our content script. So what we need to do is make sure that when the page first opens, we ask the background page to find out what is the latest word that we can use. So what that basically means is in our script just here, we're going to send a message to our background page saying fetch words. And then what we would usually do is in here, we would call the API, wait for a response, and then send the response. So once we have our API keys, we can do this. Now what you would find is if we tried to call this now without an API key, we'd get an error. So it'd say something like this, no root matched. Yeah, okay, so if we call it like this, so we've got our API, then the version, then words.json/word of the day, then put in the today's date in this format. So it's year, month, day, and then our API key. So we just copy this and replace what we had so far. And then we'll set another variable up here, which will be our API key. And we'll just call that in like this. So we'll have, so once you get your API key email that gives you the API key, so hopefully it doesn't take too long, but again, it could be from 24 hours to a week. We'll then update that. And then all we need to do as well is change this part just here with today's date. So we'll call that date equals new date. And then we know what format we want. So let's just adjust this and then add that into the string as well. Okay. And then we'll just make sure this is in the correct format. So to make sure that we get the format that we want, what we're going to be doing is using this new date. So we're using the date object, and then we're going to set this to an ISO string. And then we're going to only use the first 10 characters from this string and then cut off the rest. So that will look like this. We've got the year, the month, and then the day. So if we just test this now, so we're going to run this code and then say console log API call and add date string, just so we can see which part is which. And then down here, we'll be able to see this when we get our response. This is our script here. But first we need to update our background page just to send information. So what I've just noticed, I've written this in the wrong place, but that's fine for now. So down here, we just need to change this listener in our background page from message to fetch words. So this is where we actually want to make this API call. So we'll just copy all of this just here and paste it in here. And so instead of having that in our content script, we're going to remove all of this and then just say console log response. We can remove this. So save that. And then in this page over here, our background page, we're going to just send a response of our API call. So we'll just call that API and then paste in that variable just there. And then the next one will be date, and we'll pass in the date string just there. So if we now refresh our extension, what you need to do is go into the extensions here and then press refresh, and then go to your new tab and refresh again. And then we want to inspect the code here and see what we have. So we can see an object is being passed back. We have our API that we're calling, and then the date. And that is the correct date for me just here. So this would be perfect, except we don't have our API key yet. So all we're going to do now is just change this a little bit. So in our response here, normally we'll be calling a fetch that would call this API and then wait for the response and then send it to us then. But because we don't have our API key yet, there's no point in us doing this. So what we're going to just do is set an array of different words, and then we're going to pass in a description of these words as well. So what we're going to do is say const words object. That'll be like this, and then in here there'll be an array. So what we're going to have is a list of words. So I'll just fill this out now and then come back. Okay, so here we have two arrays of information. So we have our words and then the description that is associated with that. And then all we're going to do each time is when we get into here, we're going to randomly generate a number from 0 to 4 and then call in this word and this description. So we'll change our response to be word and description, and then we'll just get our random number. So this will be words object number, and then words descriptions object number. So that'll look like this. And then over in our script.js, we're going to be listening for this response. So then all we need to do is make sure that we update our h1 and our paragraph with the new information. So all we need to say is document query selector h1 inner HTML equals response word, like that, and then we'll do the same thing for the paragraph tag response description. So if we refresh this now, if I've done this correctly, that should update each time. So first we need to make sure that we're getting our random number. So for that, we're going to create a function up here where we set in our max number. So for here, we know our maximum number is 4. So we want between 0 and 4. So we'll just use this here and then say number equals get random number 4. And then all this will do is use the math random function, which will be a float, a random float, and then we'll times this by our maximum number that we want. So this should work. Let's just find out. Okay, it's almost right, but what this actually does is that is one number below the number that we set. So if we just change this to number and then say max equals number plus 1, this should mean that we're always getting a random number between 0 and 4. And this means as well, if we wanted to add more different words in here, you could do that as well. But again, we're going to be using the API soon. This is all just as a placeholder until that point. So if we go into here now and refresh our extension, open a new tab, we can now see that we get random words and description each time. Now, obviously, there's not too many words in here, but this is a great way to get started, and you can see how this would work. Now, one thing I want to add into this video as well is a few ways that you could improve this moving forwards. Now, the first thing I think you'd need to look at for an extension like this is a way for people to favorite certain words. Then you could have a sidebar over here where you could look through your past favorite words and see the definitions, so you can expand your vocabulary and things like that. So that's one way that you can improve this extension. But what I'll do is once I get my API key, I'll upload a video onto the channel that finishes off this particular extension. But you can see from here, this is actually already pretty much what we set out to build, in that we've got this really simple display in our new tab with a word that we can see and a description that goes with this. Okay, so that's the first extension. Okay, up next, we're building a extension we're going to call Epic Mode. Now this will appear in a pop-out, so we can click the icon up in the extensions tray, and this will make a little window appear, and there'll be a drop down where you can select a track of music, so we'll just call it 1, 2, 3, and then depending on which one you pick, that will start playing that music in the background. So even once you close that pop-out, we're going to be playing this music in our background page. So for this, we'll copy the pop-out option just here. So we're going to copy this, duplicate, we're going to call it Epic Mode, and then close all the other files we've got here. And we're going to open up our HTML file, and then we're going to change this a bit because we're not going to be playing the music in here. Again, if you want to find the starter files for this, it's in the description, and there'll be a separate link for the finished code at the end of this video as well. So that'll be this point here. So we've got our pop-out. Now what this is basically going to do is, depending on when we click play, it'll find out which option we have selected in our drop-down, and then send a message to our background page to then play that file. So as you can see, I have an MP3 file in here already. I'm going to delete that because we're going to download just 3 random tracks from the YouTube music library. So we're going to go there first. So here we are in the YouTube music library. Now there's a number of different ones, but all I want is the 3 longest tracks. So this one, okay, so you have to have this if you're using it in a video, but for the extension, you probably have to add some type of attribution to this inside your extension. But for this video, as it's just an example, I'm not going to add that in. But if you're going to be using this in production and actually out in the web store and out there, then you definitely need to add some sort of message on here as well. So that's the first one, the second one, and the third one. So there's our 3 files downloaded. So I'll come back once those have downloaded. Okay, so the files have downloaded now. So I'm going to open these and paste them into my folder. So there they are. I'm just going to rename them track 1, track 2 and track 3 just to keep it easy. So track 1. Okay, so there's my files. So what we basically need to add now is a select element in here. And then the 3 different options like that. And then just in here, we're going to add a value of 1. We'll default to the first one being selected. And then all we're going to add underneath is a button that will say play. And then in our popout.js, we're going to add an event listener for when this play button is clicked. And that will then send a message to our background page. So that will be in here. Now, what we're going to do next is add a background page. So that'll just be a new file in here called background.html. And then in here, this is going to be, it's not going to be visible on the screen. So it's just going to be an audio element with the source of this actual file. So if we had it like this and we added it to say autoplay, if we added this extension in, it should start playing straight away. So if we just check this now, so here's what we have so far. So we've got play random music, track 1, track 2, track 3. So we're going to change this and change the manifest to be our epic mode extension that we want to have. So again, we're going to call this epic mode, make browsing epic. There we have it. We'll change the title here to epic mode. And then what we actually need to do is add our background page into our manifest as well. So as we did last time for the word of the day, we'll just copy this across just to make it faster. But one thing we need to change in here, where we had persistent false before, because this is an audio element, it's going to play for a long time, or potentially a long time with the size and duration of these files, we need to make sure we change this to true. Now, just to point out, this isn't the best way of doing something like this. If you're using it in production, especially manifest version 3 is coming out, you'll probably have to change this. But for this video, it's okay. It will work and it will be this example. Because what we're trying to do here is show how you can quickly put together extensions as an MVP or a way to prove how an idea could work. So there is our background page. So if we go back and refresh our extension, you can hear the music is playing. So that means that the code in our background page is working. So we can take away this autoplay part just here and just give this audio element a class. Like that. And then we're just going to stop this extension. Okay, stop that from playing. And then all we need to do is add a JavaScript file for our background page as well. So something we can send a message to. So what we'll do is add our new script in here. So we'll call it background.js. And then we'll just add that into the background page like this. Okay, so that's like that. And then if we just go now across to our popout.js, what we're going to do is say document query selector. And then we want to listen for our button. Then we're going to say add event listener for a click. And then we'll run this function. So then in here, what we want to do is first find out what is the value of our selected element. So if we go over here and see this here and inspect, let's just make sure we can see what we're doing. If we do document query selector select, that should grab this element just here. And we want to find the value of our selected element. So let's see, that's 1. And if we change it to 2 and then just go back over here and run it again, you can see it's changing. So that's the code that we want to use to grab the value of our selected element. So if we go in here, we'll say value or selected track equals this. And then what we're going to do now is similar to in the word of the day function. If we look in our script just here, we can see we're sending a message. Now all we need to do here is just copy this first part and say send message play track, and then track is cell track. We don't need to wait for a response, so this is all we need to do. Then just make sure that we close the event listener off like that. So what we have now in this code just here is our Popout HTML file is going to open up. It's going to show the selector and the button. When they click the button in our Popout.js file just here, we're going to wait and listen for that event, grab the track that they've selected, and then pass that through to our background page. So in our background page, I'm sure you can guess by now, we need to do what we did similar to our word of the day function, is we're going to add a listener in here to see which events have been fired. So we're listening out for a particular event. So what do we call it again? Play track. So if we hear the play track message, we want to run this code in here. So all this needs to do is adjust the audio element in our background page. So what we're going to say in here is document query selector audio element. We want to grab that. So we first say audio element equals this, and then we can just say audio element source equals, and then we just check what this was again. So we're just saying here it's this, but obviously we need to make a slight change. So it'll be we'll say track name equals message. What do we pass in again? So it's message.track just here. So then we'll just update this part just here with our track name. So I'll update the source, and then all we need to do is say audio element play. So that should do what we need to do. So we'll just check this, and then we'll make a few styling edits for this extension. So let's go across now and refresh. Go to our page over here, just make a new tab, click on our epic mode, select a track, and press play. And it's working. So if we then change this track, if I just turn the volume right up, you can hear that. If we change to track 3, press play, it stops and starts playing the next one. If I can hear it. Yeah. So if we click away from our pop-out, you can see it still works. So if I go and browse any website, like this for example, we can see it's not affected by any of the tabs that I go onto. So that's playing within our background page. Now again, as I mentioned, it's not the best way to do it through a persistent background page, but for this example, you can see we've tested this idea, and then you could share this across to a few people to see if it's something they're interested in. And if you found that people are using your idea, then you can then spend more time to look into this idea. This is a great way to build a quick MVP using an extension. So finally, before we finish off this one, we're going to just adjust the design over here a little bit. So let's just stop this from playing. We should probably add a pause button as well, actually. So let's add that in now. So to add a pause button, we're going to go back to our popout.html and add another button just here called pause. And what we should probably do next is add some classes in here. So we'll say pause and add a class here that will say play. And then in our popout.js, we're going to make sure we change this to be button play. And then we'll add another event listener on button pause. And then all this will do is we don't need to get the selected track, so we can get rid of this bit. And then we're going to change this to say pause track. So we'll save that just there. Then we want to add a little bit of styling. So we're just going to say epic mode up here. Now I want to keep the styling really simple. So if you want to add your own design to this and launch it, you can. So we'll just put a body a width of about 400 pixels, background of gray again, and just try that. So what have we got so far? So there's our new display. So we have our pause button, but at the moment we haven't linked this up to anything. So if we press play, we can hear that this is playing the music. And in the new version of Chrome, you can see this information over here. But if we then press pause, so I'll just turn the volume up a little bit. At the moment, this isn't doing anything. So I'm just going to refresh that to stop it. So what we need to do is go to our background.js and add an event listener, well, add to our event listener for this extra new event. So we're going to change this to pause track over here. And then I'm sure you can probably guess where I'm going with this. We need to get our audio element again. And then instead of play, it's going to be pause. Like that. So if we refresh our extension now, we can test this out. So let's go to another tab again, refresh to make sure it's all up to date. Go to our epic mode, pick a track, press play, see if we can hear anything. Okay, so we can hear it now. And if I press pause, it stops it. Okay, so that is epic mode. You can find all of the code for that included in the description as well. Okay, so next we're going to be making our to-do list extension. Now this is going to be in a pop-out in the corner as we did earlier with our epic mode extension. Now this one is going to let us store our to-do items to local storage, and then we can mark them as complete, and then when we're finished with them and we want to just clean up our to-do list, we can then delete them from that list. So it's going to be based around local storage, and we're going to have one JSON object that we're going to be loading when we open up the extension, and we'll make all our updates into this JSON object as well. So let's start by going over to Atom again, and we're going to duplicate the pop-out option here. So we'll go in here, duplicate. Actually, we'll probably duplicate the epic mode just because that's got a little bit more code in there, so it's easier for us to follow. And again, saves time. So we're going to call this to do. So really simple to-do list. And then here we have it down here. So we're going to close everything else and then open up our to-do list. So let's go to the manifest first after we delete our music. Okay, so let's go to the manifest and change the name. So we're going to call this to-do list. This one won't need a background page, so we're that saves us a bit of time there as well. So we can delete the background.html and background.js. Just there. Okay, so all we need is our popout.html and our popout.js. So in our popout.html, we're going to change the display here a little bit. So let's remove this styling. Change this up here to say to-do list. And up here, we're just going to say my to-dos, like that. Okay, so we're going to remove all of this code, and then we're going to think about how exactly we want this to display. So ideally, we want to have a number of rows, and then on these rows, we can find out the status of each of these items. So it could look something like this. We could have an unordered list, which we could adapt, or we could have a div, and then inside here we have other divs like that. So these could be our items, and that's just like a holder element. But for now, I think we should just use an unordered list, which we can then style and adapt for what we need. So then each of our to-dos become a list item. Now inside here, we should probably add a button to mark as complete and a button to just delete. So what we'll do is first we'll set it up here, and then we're going to adapt this in JavaScript as well. So first we'll have a little line of text, so a simple to do like this, so record next video. And then over at the side here, we're going to have a span, which is complete, or we could have a tick. So we'll use emojis for this. and then we'll have another span to delete. Okay, so if we just test this by copying this and pasting it a couple of times, and then we're going to open up this extension. So if we go over here, find our to-do list, pin it, open up. Okay, so we can see that it looks a little bit like a to-do list, but we need a little bit of styling here now. So let's go over to our style block over here. We're going to add a class to our UL, and we're going to call this to-do items, and then we'll copy this, put it over here. So we'll just say margin none, padding none, and then add that as well to the LIs inside of here, like that. And then what we actually need to do as well is extend the width of the page. So let's just set that at 350 pixels. Maybe slightly less, maybe just 300. Okay, so in here now we want to remove this dot here, so we just say list style none. One thing we've just noticed is that's not, we need to put that like that. Now if we refresh, we should see the changes here. Okay, so there we go. Now we've got our items, but we want to add a little bit of padding just to the item itself, not the container. So we'll grab this one just here, paste that underneath, and just put a padding of 10 pixels and a border bottom of 2 pixels gray. Okay, that's almost what we want. And now we just need to make sure that we have our icons at the end of the row. So we'll do that just by saying display flex, justify content space between. So if we refresh this now, we can see we have these buttons here, which is almost right. I mean, for now this is perfect, but we'd probably want to make sure that this span is inside, these spans are inside of an element. So if we just put this inside of a div just here, and then copy that across, that'll just nestle them next to each other so we can adjust the padding between the two icons separately. Yeah, like that. Okay, so that's what we want here. And maybe add a slight hover effect. So if we go to this, something like that. Okay, so we can get a nice hover effect. Now for these icons here, if we tick it, we just want to have a strike through, and if we press the bin, it's going to be removed. So again, we'll just test the styling here. So for this to-do items, if it's complete, we're going to add a class called done. So if we just force this class here, or this item to have that class, so we'll say done, then we'll say text decoration line through. So that first one now should have a line through it. There we go. But it probably shouldn't be across all of this. So what we'll do is just add another span here for our actual text element. And if we have that class, we'll make sure that first one is only applying it to that first span. So we just put a little class in here called item. And then if it's done, we'll say item line through. So if we look at this now, yeah, we can see that that's crossed out. And then if we were to press it for another one, that would cross the line out for that as well. So that is all we need here. Let's just add a little bit more padding between these two items. So if we just go to do items div span, then we'll say margin 5 pixels. That should just about do it. Yeah, there we go. So we've got a nice little display there. We'll just make these a little bit bigger. And add a cursor there. Okay, so these now look clickable. There's enough space between so you won't accidentally click the wrong one. And then if we click these, we can then adjust these documents. Okay, so that's all we need there. Now let's make a JSON object that we can start to manipulate when we are storing this to our local storage. So what we want to do is on our popout.js now, which we're going to switch to, we want to remove everything here, and we're going to first write out a default JSON object. So let's just say const items equals this object, and then this object, actually this will be an array of objects. So this will be our first one just here. So we'll have item. So this will be the actual to do. So let's just again say record next video, and then we'll have the status. So status, and this will either be, let's just put 0 or 1. So again, this one here is 0, and this one will be 1. So this is our example one. And then all we want to do is say const item string equals JSON stringify items. So if we console log this, we should see what this actually looks like in action. So if we go over to here again, inspect elements, go to our console, we can see here that we have this list. But if we were to go back now and add another console log up here, just of items, we can see that we can interact with this one. So if we refresh, there's our items that we can interact with. But when you save this to local storage, it needs to be in this string format. So it's just this extra step that we need to do. So what we'll have is a function up here called fetch items. And this will make a call to local storage to fetch our items and decode it. So this will basically be like that. And then we'll have another function down here to save items. So whenever we make any changes, we want to save items down here. And that reminds me, actually, one thing we need to do is add a button so that we can create a new to do. So down here we'll just have a button at the top here, called create to do, and we'll just say new item. So let's just have a quick look at that. Maybe we'll add a little bit of padding around it, but that should be nice. And then if we click that, we'll just have a box appear where we can enter in our item and then save. So let's just add this area as well. So we'll call it new item, and then this will default to be hidden. Okay, and then in here, we'll just have a input field and another button called save. So once that's pressed, that will get saved into our object. So we'll save this for now, and whenever this is clicked, this will toggle that to appear. So let's just make a note of this here. So our button here, so if this is pressed, we need to make sure it makes that input area appear. So that's new item just here. So on click, that will open this area just here. And then for this one, if the button's pressed, it will save it and then hide that new item. So save and hide new item. So these will be the event listeners we need to link up in a moment. But first, what we're going to do is just make sure that we have a default items saved in. So when we have our fetch items just here, it's going to try and grab this from the local storage, but we'll put this in a try block just in case this is empty. So what we'll do is we'll say try and then enter our code, and then put catch E, and that'll just catch any errors just here. And then if there are errors, we'll create a default item list. So that will probably be something similar to this, but just with no objects inside there. So next, now that we know we've got our items, we want to create a for loop that will loop over all of our items like this. So it'd be an items array. But first we need to convert this from a JSON string, well, a stringified JSON string into a JSON object. So to do that, we're going to say const items array, or in this case, variable items array equals JSON pass, and then the items stringified string that we saw up here that we're going to save to local storage. So that'll be just here. And then down here, what we're going to do, whenever a change has been made, we're going to pass in a string and then save that to our local storage. So all we need to do for that is just say, if I just scroll down here, so we'll have our string. It could either be a string or it could be the object. So let's just say object. So then all we would do is we'd say string equals JSON stringify, and then we have the object. And then all we need to do is say local storage set item to do items, and then pass in our string. So that will save it and that will fetch it. So now for this to actually appear on the page, we need to go in and make sure that we are updating our unordered list. So this part just here with our, the new items. So if we just copy this for a moment and remember that we want to fetch the to-do items. So in here, we would have we would grab this element. So we'll say const items list equals document query selector unordered list, and then to do items, if it's spelled like that, to do dash items like this. So we've grabbed that there, and then all we need to do in here is say, so we're going to first up here we'll say items list in HTML. We're going to remove everything, and then we're going to say new item HTML. So we're going to set this string up here, and then down here what we want to do is grab just this part just here. So we're going to remove this first class there, and we're going to set this into our array. So we're going to say new item plus equals, and then have this just here. Just going to make this wrap around. There we go. What we're actually going to do, because this is all in ES6, is wrap it in these back ticks here, so we can adjust the display a bit and go on to new lines like that. So there we have it. And then what we need to do is make sure that we pass in the different information if this item is, if it's marked complete, and then we can change this area just here to actually be our item. So what we need to do is take note of the number in the index that this item is. So we'll have a thing here where we'll put data item index, and that will equal I. And then in here, we're going to replace this with the item part of this object. So that will be like this. Okay. And then when we're checking to see if this is marked complete or not, we need to check the status part of this. So up here, we're going to say if items array and then the number in this index, status equals 0, we don't want to do anything, but if it equals 1, we're going to set this class. So if we remember over here, we're going to set this class just here as done. So if we go over to here, we're going to say status equals empty, but in here we're going to say status equals class done. And then just in here, all we need to do is just put status. So if we remove this bit of code just here and save this, nothing will happen just yet because we don't have any data in our local storage. But if we go to our extension over here and inspect and say fetch items, we can run this code and you can see that it removed all of the items just here. But if we go ahead and take this code just here, so this string object, be sure to select it. And if you say local storage set item, and if you remember what we put here, where was it? To-do items. And then we're going to put comma, and then just make sure to get this just here. Like that, and then save, and then run fetch items again. I think the problem we have here is we need to go ahead and set this new inner HTML. So once this for loop has ended, if we go in here and set this to new item HTML, and then go back to our code, inspect element here, run fetch items, you can see now that this is, if I just move this out of the way, that we can see we have our real item and our fake item just here. So if we now remove this code from in here, so this is, it's just an empty UL, and then inside our Popout at the bottom here, we're going to run the code that will just say fetch items. And what we will see if we go back and refresh, it's remembering each time what we have here. And if we were to go into the local storage and change this object, obviously it won't be like this, we'll be able to change it within our own code. But if we see in here, we have local storage, and you can see the items that we have here. Now the way this works is it displays the object like this, but you have to send it in as a string. So that's what one thing you want to really be careful for. And if I change this title, so I put new title over here, and if we close this and open again, you can see it's remembering exactly what we've put. So another thing you could do really, if you're developing this at the same time, is going ahead and changing the text here, so making this a content editable, or even having these as an input field, that anytime there's a click event or on key up, you change the text that's saved to local storage as well. But anyway, quickly we're going to go ahead and add these next two parts just here. So if any of these items are clicked, we want to make sure that we have an event that's going to listen for this. So down here, we're going to add an on-click event just here. So where we have the div element and our spans, I'm going to say on-click item complete, and then what we'll do is pass through this again, just here. So we want to then make sure that we pass it in like that, and that'll have our item. And then over here, we want to make this say item delete. Okay, so we can see this. And then once we click these, we're now going to add the functions for these to actually adjust. So this is item delete, so we add a function here. So again, we have the index that we're going to use just here, and then the same thing for item complete. We have our index. What we need to make sure that we do though is over here, when we're fetching our items from the storage, we need to make sure that we can use this same code. So again, we're going to go over here, we're going to copy this, and at the start of these functions, we're going to paste this in. Now you could save this as a window variable, but this just helps to make sure that it's always the most up-to-date code. The only problem with that is if it's changing behind the scenes, the index could change, but thinking about it, it should be the same because the change will be in this event just here. So we'll paste this in again for these items just here. And then all we need to do here is change the status for this item. So to do that, we just go to the items array. So we'd say items array, and then use the index that we passed through just here, and then status equals 1. And then we'll do exactly the opposite of what we did before. So then we've got our object just here, and then all we need to do is say save items, and then pass in our object, and that'll save that string for us. But before we do that, we need to update the display of this field. So over here, we want to add the class of done for this item. So what we do is we say document query selector, then we can go to our list just here, so to do items, and then what we want to do next is grab the li, so the list element, and then we're going to use the data that we set up here, so the item index, like that. So we say data item index equals, and then we want to pass in this variable, so we've got the index, so make sure you add that in just like this. So we can see we have these brackets, then we have first double quotes and then single quotes and then the plus to make sure that the variable fits in there. And then we're just going to say class list add done. So let's just test this now. I think I've put it in right. And then go over to here, click this box. Let's check errors here. We can't have inline click events, that's fine. So all we need to do is just make sure that we have a separate listener, which is probably better to do anyway, actually. So over here where we have these on click events, we're just going to change this to be a click event on these particular items. So again, after this, we're going to loop through this separately. So what we're going to do down here is say document query selector all, and then we're going to say ul li. So we're going to loop all of our list items. So we'll call this items list, like that. And then we'll create a new for loop for these items. And then on each one, we're going to add this event listener. So we'll say like this. So we grab the index again for this item. Then we're just going to say add event listener. We need to make sure though, first, that we don't add it to this whole function. We go and say query selector span, and then we'll probably set a class here. So we'll say span class item complete, like that. So then we'll just say item complete, and then we'll add our click event, like that. And then all we need to do here is, because the index is the same, we can then call that function. So we'll just say item complete, and then I, like that. And then we'll do exactly the same thing for the delete function. So we'll change this to item delete. And then up here, we'll change this to a class. So if we refresh this now, I think I've put this in right. So if we go on this one and tick, okay, so we need to make sure that where we have this I, this is looping. So when that event listener has happened, it's gone through to the end of that function. So we need to make sure that we grab the list item from here. So if we say var index equals, let's work out, so we've got the item here, so its parent will be this div. We want the parent again, so parent.parent, and then we would say data set. So let's start by just logging that to the console and seeing what we get. So if we do console log index, this button will ignore the error that we get, and just before that, so its parent should be parent element or parent node. So if we refresh this now and try this again, so if we look in here, we should see the data set. So we go item index is 0. So that was 2 before. So that was where it looped through all of the array. We're right at the end because the event listener is running after that's all happened. So that's where we need to grab this item index. So all we need to do is put this just here. And then instead of putting I, we're going to put index. And that should then link this all up correctly so that we're not getting this. So this status part isn't invalid. So if we save this and reload, and now if we tick this, we can see that it's marking it as complete. But if we just go into our application now and edit these ourselves, so we put 0 just here and just here, and fresh. So if we go over here and tick, we can see it's not updating right away, but it is if we went away and then came back. But we want this to happen there and then on the page. So let's have a look at what could be causing this. So if we tick this one, we know it's happened and we know it worked. Okay, so it's the add part just here. So we could just say class name equals done. That should do what we need. So if we go ahead and undo where we updated these, because it's updated it into the local storage already. So that is 0, that is 0. Go over here and refresh, come back, there we go. So it's marking these as complete, and then all we need to do next for this part is just remove that item from the object. So for our delete, all we need to do here is a lot easier. So for our index, we'll just say items array splice. Now we pass in the index, and then how many items from here do we want to remove is 1. So then all we should need to do is then, where is it? Up here where we have save items, we pass in this same code. But then what we need to do first is where we were setting the class just here. On this one, we just need to remove it. So we'll just say remove, like that. So if we test this over here again and delete, help if we call the right function. So item delete, and then go over here, open this, delete, open this. Okay, so you can see it's deleted the item, but the problem we had, so if we just add this, we need to call the function, and that would remove it. So if we go now, we've removed all of our items, so this should be empty, like that. So if we go away, come back, we can see this is all removed. So if we now click on our new item, we want to now make it so we can set our new items in here. So this won't take too long. So just over here, we're going to create an event listener for each of these. So we can remove all of this code over here. And then all we're going to do is create a event listener. So we'll do document query selector on create to do. So this is our new item button, like that. I'm going to say add event listener, same as before, click, and that'll go to this function. And then in here, all we want to do is open or display this new item element here. So we just say document query selector again, new item, style display is block. So if we go back over here now, open this, we can see that it's appearing. And then all we need to do is add a listener to this save button, so we can grab whatever is in this text field, so long as it's not empty, and then save it into our list and then hide that input field again. So all we need to do is copy this code rather than writing that out again. And then we'll say new item here, new item button. So if we just check, what's that button called? Yep, it's just button. So when that's clicked, we want to grab the item. Let's just call it item name equals, so it'll be this, but instead of button, it's input. And then if input or item name does not equal isn't empty, then we will save it. So to do that, all we need to do is go down here and grab this. So we've got our item storage that we're grabbing. And then all we need to say is items array equals, so we're going to add a new element onto this, equals item, and then this is where we pass in our item name, like that, and then status is 0 or 0, like this. So we just need to put this in quotes. And then as same as before, we need to say save items and then pass in our items array. And then once that's done, we want to fetch our items again so that everything is renewed. So let's just test that. And then obviously we need to hide it if it worked. So if we go over to here, new item. Okay, so one thing we probably should do is say push and put that in like this. because we're pushing that object onto the end of our array. So let's just refresh that. So new item, record my next video, save, almost. Okay, right, I didn't say value. So the item value here, we want item name to be a value. And if it's not, so if we save it, that should work now. We know that that's all there. So if we go over to here, new item, record a video, save, there we have this. We can tick these, we can remove them. And what we need to do is make sure that when we click save that we hide this. So it's just the opposite of this line. So under here, once everything is complete, we say none, so that will hide it. So here we go. We open our items. So we've got item here. So again, record my next video, save, that's added. So the next item, we should probably make that, remove that value as well. Could be fix my laptop and add that here. So go to new item. So all we're going to do now is just make sure we remove this, and then that is this extension complete. Took a little bit longer than I thought for this one. So over here, we'll grab this value and we'll just say value equals empty. So if we go over to this again, we go to our item. So item text here, save, and then here we go, it's empty. So that is how we can create a really, really simple to-do list. So you can mark items as complete and then remove them, all from within a Popout extension. Okay, so next we're going to be building our web scraper and automation tool. So it's a simple extension that's going to be in our Popout, and this will let the user set a number of different actions that they want to perform on this page. So for example, you could say after 3 seconds, press this button, enter this text into this input field, and then save this text from another, from a div on the page, for example. And you can create a number of different actions in a number of different combinations. So you can do different types of automation and grabbing and scraping data from the page as well. So that's what we're going to be building next. Now, because this extension is a little more complicated than the others, I've gone ahead and set up a folder for this one already. So we have this web scrape folder just here. In the manifest, we have the title here, so simple scraper. We have our browser action popout.html, and we have a content script that we're going to run as well. So the way this is going to work, I've gone ahead and just planned this out a little bit in advance this time. So in our popout.html, we have just a simple heading here, and then we're going to have a div underneath with our different types of commands. Now, each command can be a number of types. So it can either be a wait, a click, you're going to enter some type of value or text, and then you can save text as well. So that will be, you can grab that all at the end once this command has completed. And then once you've entered all of the inputs in there, there'll be a button down that can just start this command and start it running. So that's what it looks like in our popout.html. So the JavaScript for this will work in a number of different ways as well. So we have our popout.js here, and that's going to generate an object based on all of that information we've just set up just there. And obviously you can add new items into this array, and they'll each be an object. So as you can see here, we have this first one's type is wait, and then we've got a value. So there's 2 value fields. I don't know if I showed you there. Yes, we've got value 1 and value 2. So obviously if you want to have a type of wait, you need to say how long that they should wait for. And then for click, the option there, so you'd say click, and then value 1, it will be the actual query selector ID of an element, for example. So that's all we'll be doing here. So when they click start, it will just run this function here that will grab the current tab. So because the Popout's open there, we can grab the current tab and then send this message into our content script that will be listening for any events to be sent to us. So again, for this, we're using the manifest version 2. So down here, we'll then send a message to our active tab. So as you can see here, active tab, and that will pass in this run commands message, and then this data object that we're going to be generating from whatever we've selected in our Popout extension. Now the content script is going to be listening for this command. So here you see run commands. Then it will grab the scrape object, which again will look something like this. And then we'll have a loop that will run through of each of these objects and perform this action. So that's what we're going to be building. That's how it's going to look. So let's get started on this now. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is make sure that we have this object being generated. So we're going to start by just commenting, or removing out these comments. So I'll just change this like that and this like that. So we know what we have just here is an example input field. So let's just remove this bit. So if we save this now and open it on the page, we can just see what we have so far. So we'll just save that. So if we click over here, we can find a simple scraper here, unpin this one. Okay, so if we open it up, you can see what this will look like. So again, it's very basic design. So what we need to add so far is 2 buttons. So one of these buttons will let us add another element onto this display. And then the next button will let us start running this command, and it will send that event to our content script. So let's go ahead now and add 2 buttons, and then we'll start to link up all the JavaScript for this as well. Called action buttons. And then inside here, we're just going to have button here, and this will be to add a new item or a new command. So we'll say add command, and then down here underneath, this one will just say run. So that will start running all of the code, and that'll just be run command. So if we just refresh that now over here, we can see we have our 2 buttons. One thing I think would be important is for this to just be displayed alongside each other, or else this could be quite long if we have lots of different events, and then maybe add a maximum height here so it can scroll if there's loads more. So if we just go back over here and add a little bit of styling, again, it's not to make it look too nice, it's just to make sure it's functional. And again, as with the other extensions, the main thing we're trying to get here is speed, so we can see how quickly we can prototype these ideas. So again, we're just setting some basic styles in here just to see what we have. So that's a little bit more space. And if we can get these all to appear on one line, so we'll set a maximum width on these, and then that should be everything we need. So we'll make this slightly smaller, and then input will have a width of about 130, I think, something like that. Almost. Let's just inspect this and make sure we're getting exactly the right amount here. Okay, so 100, and that seems okay like that. Okay, so there we go. So let's change that down to 100 and make that maybe 55. How does this look? Okay, yeah, that's okay. And then we can just add a bit of margin around there later on. But if we copy this a number of times just to simulate if we had lots of events here, so I'll just copy this 5 times. Okay, we can see that we can fit in a number of events here. So you can imagine if we had, say, wait 1 second and leave this empty, and then we'd say click. So it'd be body, and then something of a class of button, or just the first button on the page. So it'd always grab the first element. So we want to be specific with that. And then we could enter a value. So say we want to add something into the first input field on the page. We could say this is a string, and that would add that onto that page. So if we were to say run, it would then start to run this code. Yeah, this seems to be okay. So this is what we're going to move forward with. And then we need to make sure if we press this button here, it's going to add another element that we can use here. So this is what we need so far. Okay, so now we're going to go into our popout.js and start to link up these buttons. So let's take this add command just here, and first we'll set a event listener to that button. So we'll use query selector, we'll find that button, and then we'll just say add event listener. And then in here, we're just going to append a new element onto the end of that list that's a blank object. So all we need to do is just copy this HTML just here. And then we will say new item equals, use backticks because we're using ES6. We can have this over multiple lines like that. And then we just need to say commands list. So we'll do query selector again, pass in this, and then we'll just say inner HTML plus equals new item. So what this would do, if we had, because we're setting the inner HTML rather than appending a new div element that we've created, if we have any event listeners, if we have any event listeners on these actual elements here, they'll be removed because we're actually replacing the inner HTML. But for this example, we're not going to have any listeners on this part. We will on these buttons, but that's not going to be replacing the buttons because they're outside of that scope. So if we refresh this now and try and press this button, we can see it adds new commands here, which is exactly what we want. So the next step is just to add a listener for this run button and then create a function that can convert this list of input fields into the object that we want to create. So all we need to do is just copy this event up here, change the thing here from new command to run command, and then all we're going to do is just call a function so this can be more repeatable if we want to add this in from another part of the code. So we'll create a function up here called create command object, and then all we would do is just make sure that we call this from here, and then all this is going to do, we're going to say document, so we'll say up here commands, and this would be query selector all for each of the divs inside of that list. So that'll be query selector all. Then all we need to say over here is command list and then command item. So we grab all of the items that are inside there like that. And so now we've got an array that we can loop through. So if we just add a for loop just here of our commands, Atom's helpful in filling that out for us just to save time. So what we can do in here is start to create our object. So what we're going to do up here is set an empty array. So we'll say set a variable again of commands array, and this will just be an empty array like this. And then down here we're going to say item object, and that'll just be an empty object like this. And then all we need to do is just push these onto the end of the object. So if we find the example we wanted to create here like this, we can see we're just going to add a type and then 1 and 2 at the end here. So as simple as it is, we just say item object type, and then we can grab the select value inside of here. So because we know which item we're on here, so we've got commands I, we can say item object type is equal to commands, and then the index here, we can run the query selector again. So this is on this element just here of each of the elements, and we want to grab the value of the select field that's currently selected. So what we need to do here is say query selector select value. So that'll be the type, and then we're going to do the same thing again for value 1 and value 2. So that would just be, let's just double check, yeah, so it's called 1 and it's called 2. So there's 1 and 2, and then we just need to change this select part here with value 1, which links up with this class name down here, and then the same again for value 2. So that will generate our object. Now we just need to make sure that we add it onto this array. So to do that, we just say commands array push, and then add our item object. So that should be everything we need so far. We're just going to run through and test this first. So what we'll do is at the end of this loop, so once that loop's finished, we'll just say console log and pass in our commands array like that. So if we go up here and refresh, add a couple of commands over here. So we've got wait, let's say 1 second again, says 1000 milliseconds, and then we want to click the first button on the page, and this one will just enter a value onto a element that's got a class of input, and it'll just say text. So if we say run and then inspect this and check the console, if this has worked, yeah, we have an array here of objects. So that is perfect. So that's doing the first part that we need. Now we can push this through to our page and then start running this code. Okay, so all we need to do to push this through to our page is just adjust this code we had down here. So we can remove our example object because we're building this ourselves now. And then we just need to move this across into the end of that function there. So we'll just copy this and add it down here. And then because we have our commands array here, we have our objects, we can just say object equals commands array, and that should then pass this through. So we just remove this. So what this piece of code does is it grabs the current selected tab and will push a event through to that tab. So we can just move these lines, save that. And if we go to our content script now, and just where we're listening for this event, we're just going to do exactly what we did before and add a console log for this scrape object, just to make sure that it's getting through to our content script. Click onto our extension. So we're going to wait 1 second again. And then what we're going to do is add another command to, so as you can see, actually what this is doing is it's adding that onto there. So that removed amount of seconds. So here we can find out what part of the code we want to adjust. So if we were to click this page here, we can find what query selector we'd actually need to click onto. But what we're going to do first is test out grabbing the content from the page. So if we look to try and grab this title here, that would be this element. So if we press this button over here, we can grab that. So if we go over to this extension again, we would say wait 1 second, add a command. Actually, it's done it again. So we would wait 1 second, and then we want to save whatever content is in this query selector just here. So this is what we're going to do in the next part of this extension. But if we press run now and just go to our console, keeps disappearing. But if we wait again 1 second, add our command. So 1 second, add our command, then run. So we need to add into our permissions access to this active tab. Like this. So if we try it again now, that's like that. Refresh our extension, refresh the page. So we go over here, just wait 1 second, run our command. So let's change this from active tab to all URLs. But so now that we have our manifest has access to all URLs and a permission here, and our content script over here should have access to the page. So if we go ahead now and try and run this, so if we go over to our website, if we go over to this website again, press onto our extension, set our commands. Now obviously we have this problem at the minute where if we enter this and then press add a command, because we're updating the whole of the inner HTML each time, it's going to remove this from the page, but we can adjust that later just by appending it rather than adjusting the inner HTML. Okay, so the reason this isn't coming through yet is because we have message name, which I put in wrong. It should be message command. So if we remove this extra console log that we had and run this code again, so we'll go over here, refresh our page, refresh our extension, over here, open it up, add a command. So we're going to wait 1 second and enter value onto the first H1. Actually save the value of the first H1 and then run this command. We can see this is getting pushed through, and then here is the data just here. Now what we need to do next is take this object and actually make sure that we perform these actions on the page. So we're going to go over here now and create a function that can actually do this. So now that we know that we're getting this data through to this page, we're going to go down here and create a function for each of these different types of events. So the first type that we're going to have is await, and then this will then call the function to run the next one. So we need to think this through carefully to make sure that we're doing this in a way that's going to work. So for the click events, we'll say click event, then we'll just have the input, or let's just say selector, and then we can do the same thing for save event, and that will just be the selector we want to save, and then the same thing again for our enter event. And then what we're going to do is pass in the index that we've got through so far and the whole object itself. So all we need to do is pass the object and the index. So the next time that we are moving through the object, we can just add 1 to this. So what we'll do is just say the end item, so the end of the index. So if this matches it, we know not to continue anymore. So we just add these for each of these, like that. We might change this as we move forward, but this is what we're going to use just now. So over here, actually, yeah, I thought of a better way of doing this already. We're going to say function get next item, and that's what we're going to call at the end of each part of this event. And then this here will then work out what function we need to call. So all this needs is the selector, and if it's a save event, it will need the input, whatever it's going to be there. So we'll create this now. Hopefully that makes sense. So for get next item, that will need to take in the object and the index. So the previous index, we'll add 1 to it each time. So when we're running our commands, all we need to do here is say get next item, and then pass in the object just here and an index of 0. So we can start at 0 each time. Yep, that sounds good. So over here, this is all we need to have. So it's going to grab our data and then pass our scrape object into get next item. So in here, all we need to do is check that there's a valid item at this index. So we'll say if our object and then the actual index that we've been sent here is not undefined, so as long as this exists, then we can go ahead and run this code. If we know that it doesn't exist, we've completed all of the results, and then we can start to send a return with any data, or just so that the command is completed. So we'll leave that here for now, and then all we need to do in here is just check which function that we need to call. So we would say if object index type equals click, then we can call the click event. So that means we don't need any of this over here. We just need to pass in the object and the index, but we don't need the end item anymore. So that will look a little bit like this. So if it's click, we would just need to pass in, actually it keeps it a lot more simple, so it's just the object and the index. So that'd be this current index, and at the end of this function, we would just say get next item like this, and we'll just do index +1. So that keeps it nice and simple because we have that check every time. So what we need to do first here is have our click event, and we also need to add another function over here as a wait event if we need to wait X amount of seconds, for example. So again, we can remove this selector part. We only need the object and the index. So let's just focus on this wait event first. So up here, we know that we've got our object and our index. So what we're going to do is grab our item. So we'll just call item equals object and index. That'll be the actual object within this array. So I don't know why I'm calling it object, but that'll grab the one that we need here. And then we can just literally say, for this, we already know that it's a wait event. So we'd set a timeout here. So because we know this is a wait event, we can set a timeout straight away. So we'd have our set timeout, a function just here. We can run our code, and then all this needs to do is enter the amount of seconds that we need to wait. So we would just close that function just there, add a comma, and then this is where we would put our value. But we'd need to make sure as well that we change this into a number rather than it being a string that it is at the moment. That'll be item.1, and then we can just close that all off like this. So once that's finished, we would move this inside here. So once that's finished, it will then run the next part and grab the next, continue on the different commands. But first we need to make sure that we change this into a number. So to do that, we have our variable just here. Then we literally just say pass int like that. And then it will be what we need just here. So next for our click event, we'll follow a very similar pattern. So we're going to use our item just here like that. And then all we would do for this one is for this part, the query selector is item 1. So we'll just say document query selector. And then in here, we'll pass in our item 1 like that. And then we'll just say click. And then we'd run our next item straight away. So that's all we need to do for this one. For our save event, it's a little bit different. So just copy this code here. In the save event, we want to grab any value that is at this selector. So instead of saying click, we would just say inner text or inner HTML. For this option, we'll probably just grab the value. One thing we probably want to adapt if you're wanting to launch this is check the actual type that we're grabbing here. So if it's an input field, you just want to change this to value rather than inner text. But for this example, we want to move through quickly, so we'll just use this for now. And so here we'll say value is this. And then what we'll add somewhere actually is an array of objects that we're saving. So up here, before we start running this, we'll just say window scraper extension, and then just set an empty array just here. And then we can just push these values onto the end of this. So down here where we have our save event, we'll just say scraper extension push, and then add our value just here. So that's all we need to do there. And then again, we'll go to our next item. And then for our enter event, it's a very similar method that we'll follow here. So instead of setting the value here, we'll just change this to value equals item 2. Then we can get rid of our save just here. So that obviously would be useful for input fields and things like that. So if we just go through and check what we have here, it looks to be what we need. So we have our wait event, our click event, our save event, and our enter event. So up here, we just need to add the extra types and call the right function each time. And enter. So and then down here, we know that it's all completed. Well, for now, we'll just set an alert. So we'll say command have been run. And then all we need to do is send a request back to our Popout extension with the any data that was saved here. So all we need to do for that is go up here. Actually, we'll do it straight from here actually. So we'll say Chrome runtime send message. We'll say command run complete. And then data will be this window object just here. We can pass that straight back. We don't need to wait for a callback here because we know that that's complete. And then in our popout.js, we can just add a listener for this event. So up here, we'll just say Chrome runtime on message and listener, or message sender and response. And then we'll just have a function in here that will call this code. So we'll call this function just here. And then all we need to do is if message.command, if I put that in right, equals run complete, we then want to run this code just here. So over here in our popout.html, we're going to add a text area at the bottom here that by default will be hidden, like that. But when we get this callback just here, we're going to fill in this information of any response that we get back. So we'll just say text area. So over here, we'll do document query selector, grab this text area, and then set the value to be, what was it we passed in? So we call it data. So it'll just be message data. But first, we want to turn that into a JSON object. So we'll just say JSON stringify and pass that in just there. So that was quite a few changes, but let's just check now if this actually worked. So we have our event listener here that's listening for when we send a response back from our content script. We wrote all of these events just here. So again, that should work. And then that's called over here. So let's give this a go. Let's make sure actually we set this before we start running these events. We need to make sure that we refresh our extension over here. And then we refresh our page. So what we're going to do is set 2 commands. Let's make sure we remove that comma just there. So we will refresh our extension. So we're going to add a command. So first we'll wait, say 500 milliseconds. We want to save the value. So we want to get the first H1 if there is one. And then we want to click on the first link. Or we could say wait 100 milliseconds and then just run that. Let's just try this for now. So let's run this function. So it says commands have been run. If we say OK, we can see this is closed. Was there an error? Nope. So what we should probably do as well is have that alert run on our Popout extension rather than the content script. So we'll just take this here, remove that, and have that appear over here. And be sure to update the display of our text area as well. So say style display is block, like that. So if we just first grab this element just here, this will be the one that we want to grab. So we'll do that. Go back to our console instead, refresh our extension actually. And then we'll go in here, add a command. So it's going to wait 500 milliseconds again. They want to save the value of that first link, and then we'll press run. What we would actually notice down here in our wait event, we're not using the integer that we passed here. We're just using the item 1. So that's going to add the wrong part here on our timeout function. So if we go back and refresh our extension now, we can test this properly. So do we still have this copied? No. So let's go ahead and grab this again. So we'll get this part here, go back to our console, open here. So we'll add 2 commands again. So we're going to wait 500 milliseconds. We're going to save the value of this link here. So we'll grab the inner text from here, and then we'll just say run. We can see it's starting our commands. It's saying the pop-out has got the response back. It's saying commands have been run. So let's see when we click OK, it should show our text area and see if we get our response from that link there. There we go. We can see it's saved the link from this. So if we had this grab a number of different links, you can see how that would pull in different content from different places. Now let's try this on a different site where we can actually enter into an input field, for example. Actually, there's one over here. So let's try entering something into here and grabbing that text event. So if we grab this over here and try and enter something. So what we're going to do is say wait 200 milliseconds. We'll add a command. So we'll wait 200 milliseconds. We're going to enter a value into this field here. So we'll say search this text, and then we'll just wait 100 milliseconds. Let's try running this command just here. So again, the commands have been run. We'll say OK. We didn't save any data here, so that's what you'd expect. It shouldn't return anything. But as you can see up in the corner here, it says search this text, and that means that it's all worked and it's actually inputted into this input field. So that is how you can quickly put together a little extension that you can use to either scrape data or automate certain actions on a page. Now, I would recommend a number of changes if you're thinking about launching something like this yourself. So the first one would definitely be, where we're entering this data over here, then adding new commands, changing it so we're creating a element that we're appending onto the parent div each time rather than changing the inner HTML, then it wouldn't remove this. And generally making it so that we can perform actions across different pages rather than all on one page. So for example, if I wanted to make this click this button and that changed the page, you should think about ways you could get it to continue running as well. There's actually a video on my channel that details how you can run functions across multiple pages, so be sure to check that out as well if you wanted to do something like that. But that is how you can build a simple web scraper and automation tool using a Chrome extension. So we managed to make 4 extensions in this video. It didn't take too long, so it's shown how you can quickly prototype ideas and get them out, get people using them and see if the idea works before spending loads of time on development. So it's just a few ways you can really speed up the way that you put things together. So if you've got any questions on how I went about anything in this video on the different extensions that we made, feel free to leave a comment and I'll try and get back to you. But otherwise, you can find links to the code that we started with and the code that we created for each of these extensions as well in the description. So thanks for watching. I hope you found this video useful. In the next couple of videos, we're going to be looking into the version 3 of the Chrome manifest. So there's a lot of changes that are coming soon. But at the moment, these aren't confirmed yet. There's a few things moving around here, but I'm going to try and make a really in-depth series looking into the changes that they're going to be making and how we can actually improve our extensions with the updates that are coming to Chrome as well. So anyway, thanks for watching and I'll see you in these new videos.